Aye, alright. So, this episode there is from my Patreon. I put it on Patreon last week, so that means that today, by the time you're seeing this one on here, there should be a new one of these on Patreon today when you're hearing this on Spotify. Hopefully that makes sense. Obviously it's Spotify or Apple, wherever you're listening to this, so hopefully there should be a couple adverts breaking this up. Now, if you don't want adverts breaking this up, go and listen to it on Patreon. You can find it on there. But it'd be nice. You have to sign up as a free member at the very least for this episode, and then you should, if you sign up as a free member to my Patreon, you should actually now get a discount for your first month on Patreon. They've added that, which I think is a mint feature, so you can try it out for even less than £3 a month. You can get access to everything. I don't know what discount it'll give you. It seems to be somewhat automated. I'm going to look into that, but yeah, there's loads on there. This is chapter 25. It's about the Piltdown Man. I thought, because we've already covered this with History Homos with William, I thought maybe it'd be nice to add a little bit more colour to it by reading from a book which is kind of good, kind of interesting, also in parts and places kind of shit. Next week's episode, as in this week, as you're listening to this on the day it goes out, if you are, which maybe some of you are, hopefully, next one seems to be about Nazis, so if you're into a bit of that, come on over. Otherwise, just enjoy this one. Don't forget to leave a comment on this, maybe share it, leave a like, leave a 5-star rating on here as well. Maybe if you're feeling very generous, whenever you go out the house, leave me podcasts to play on your device while you're out. If you've got a tablet or a spare phone because you cheated on your missus or your partner or whatever, play this. I'm not going to tell them, obviously then they make it a lot easier for them to find your phone. Maybe not if you're cheating, but, maybe you've got a spare device. It would be nice if you did that. It gets the views and that up on these, because it's really hard to advertise a podcast. No one wants to listen to it. No matter how many people come into live streams and say, I enjoyed that. That was very funny. I really enjoyed it. Don't matter. No one believes them. So, I'm glad you're listening. Hope you enjoy this. If you do, join the Patreon, where there's about 300 extra episodes that you can't hear anywhere else. Anyway, here's the chapter about the Piltdown Man from World's Strangest Crimes, chapter 25. You alright? So, we're on chapter 25. This one's got a picture of a skull with an hole in it, a pickaxe which is almost the same size as a skull, and what looks like a little thin shovel, a little thin spade stuck in the ground. It's called The Mystery of the Missing Link, and just off the name of that, I'm imagining that this is about the Piltdown Man. I don't know that for certain, but we did cover the Piltdown Man, me and William from History's Homos. So, to those of you on Patreon, this is going out free on Patreon as well. It's also going out on Spotify and that. I may put it out on Spotify in a few days. I'm also live on YouTube and TikTok recording it. So if you want to watch the video version of this, go over to the YouTube. But it won't sound as good as this, so you may have to be clever and try and fix it and time them together. Maybe. Don't know. But let's little swig of water and then we'll get into this one. So obviously the Piltdown Man is a pretty cool story. Just a con man, essentially. Not all crimes are the type that break a clearly defined law and therefore invoke the attention of the police and the judiciary. They may involve dishonesty and even fraud, but without any financial motive. It is more usual to think of such misdemeanours in terms of scandal, particularly when they question the integrity of somebody of standing in society or of eminence in the arts and sciences. See, this is what we like. They're going like that on science. They're like, science? Load of shit. Bollocks, mate. Bollocks to you. What are you on about here? It was a scandal of this kind which blew like a tornado through the reputation of Charles Dawson, solicitor and amateur archaeologist, nearly half a century after his death. For Dawson was the discoverer. Discoverer doesn't sound right, does it? But Dawson, knowing the story, Dawson was the discoverer of the Piltdown Man, who, after some 40 years of respectability in scientific circles, turned out to be a crock of shit. Dawson lived in Lewes, Sussex, as a man, England, as a man of law. He was a respected member of the community, and his hobby was archaeology, conferred on him an intellectual cachet. No idea what that means. I've got no idea at all what that means. Conferred on him an intellectual cachet. Maybe it means, because he's into digging up bones. But is this the thing with archaeology, though? Because we've been shown that archaeology, to a degree, is a load of shite. Because a lot of people just make up fake dinosaurs and make up fake dinosaur bones and then say, look at this, I've found another. And as long as all the science makes sense, then they've got to go along with it, innit? Other scientists have to go, oh, yes, this dinosaur is real. Yes, I confirm it's real. Yes, because I hope to raise the funds to be able to get a factory in the Guizhou province to make me one as well. And if that doesn't make sense to you, you should listen to my Are Dinosaurs Real episode. But he was, where are we up to? Oh, it's just odd anyway, because you could just get a fucking turkey at Christmas, the frozen turkey, shove it in the ground, come back to it a few years later, dig it up and go, Jesus, look at these turkey bones here. There must have used to be wild turkeys here back in the day. Do you know what I mean? Nonsense. Load of shit. Where are we up to? He was a very active archaeologist, indeed, paleontologist, and spent his spare time roaming the countryside in search of prehistoric flints and fossils with much success. See, that's dodgy as well, I think. If an archaeologist or a paleontologist has loads of success, because there's a big element of luck, isn't there, to archaeology. Obviously, you could do a bit of research. You'd be like, look, it looks like at some point in history there was a battle in this area here, and you could probably circle it on a map. But if you can pin that down to the exact field, you're a dodgy bastard. You've done something here to know that this is happening. You've either got access to some form of time apparatus, be it a crystal ball or a time machine, or some form of window that you can use to look and be like, this is fucking ropey here. Let's watch these lads fight. Or you're hiding the stuff, or just buying it and claiming you found it there. It's just not. I just don't understand how you can be a successful archaeologist. You can be a lucky archaeologist, but his collection included many unusual specimens, even relics of a dinosaur and bones of a new, unclassified prehistoric animal, which was duly named after him. It was called, what was his name? Dawson. Charles. They named it Charles. That's terrible. An unclassified prehistoric animal, which was duly named after him. Charles. He was well known at the British Museum, where he used to send many of his finds for inspection and identification. For his indefatigable enthusiasm, didn't get tired, he was regarded as quite an expert in his own right. In 1908, at the age of 44, Dawson was the steward of Barkham Manor at Piltdown in Sussex, a nearby gravel pit close to Piltdown Common, particularly interested in because of the unusual colouring nature of the gravel, almost like someone had put it there. But this, in 1908, is at least 50 years before the invention of B&Q. He did some digging in the pit himself, and asked the estate workmen to bring to him any curious pieces of bone or gravel they happened to find when working in the pit. They'd never do that now. If you'd ask some workmen digging up a road or whatever, or if you find any bones in there or anything like suspicious or weird, let me see it. They'd probably report you, because they think you've hidden a body, or they'll find that bit of dinosaur and they'll be like, fucking fill that in right now with tarmac, otherwise we all lose our fucking jobs. If people think there's a dinosaur here, or a mammoth, or a woolly rhinoceros hidden here under the fucking, the A37, or whatever, the B5743276, we're not getting paid. They'll get the archaeologists in, they'll get the scientists in, and we'll be fucked. We'll be out of a job, we'll be out of our houses, because I imagine a lot of them sort of workers are on the, do you know what I mean? I imagine. Because I imagine they've got a lot of spare disposable income, so if you have a lot of disposable income, you probably will be on the, it just makes sense, doesn't it? During the next few years, they found a great deal. Dawson took a series of more than 20 specimens of flint, bones and teeth to the British Museum. So impressed with the museum authorities that one of their senior paleontologists personally took part in diggings at the Piltdown site. Now, what you've got to remember, in 1908, dinosaurs had only existed for about 40 years, I think it is. Was it 1863? We came up with dinosaurs. It was around then, so it was pretty big stuff still. It'd be like what computers are now. computers were invented, like 30, 40 years ago, the household computer became more of a possibility, but whereas now it's more ubiquitous. Like now, at this point in time, in 1908, dinosaurs, everyone knows about dinosaurs, but we are just about to decide we're not interested in dinosaurs, and over the next sort of 10, 15 years, we are going to all start obliterating each other with mortar fire in French fields, so just to bear that in mind. Among these finds were fragments of a very old skull, pieces of a fossilised cranium, and an ape-like section of jawbone. So these workers, right? They're like, dig over that gravel. All right. If you find anything interesting in there, have you found out interesting yet? No. Have you found anything yet? No. Have you found anything yet? No. Have you found anything today? No. Have you found anything in there? No. And eventually they do find something. I'd be very suspicious of the fella that keeps coming up to me going, you found anything in there? You'd be like, no. You'd be like, oh, all right, then, all right. And he comes and asks the next day, have you found anything in there? And he's just fucking suspicious, isn't it? Like that fella who used to work at the school who got involved with them two little girls that had gone missing. I can't remember the name of the girls or of the guy. They were in football shirts in the paper though, years ago. It's a bit similar to that, it seems. And an ape-like section of jawbone complete with teeth, but with the molars worn flat. In addition, there were animal fossils dating back 500,000 years to the early Ice Age. As all the finds were roughly in the same time of the gravel pit, it was logical to assume that they had approximately the same point of origin in time. The piece of jaw and the small fragments of skull on close examination appeared to be more human than simian. The flattened molars were undeniably characteristic of the swinging motion of the human jaw as compared with the less flexible animal jaw. See, this has been written, for those of you that don't listen to this on Patreon normally, the guy that wrote this book is, we assume, big into the drink. Because usually by the second page of a chapter, the words are all over the place. But this is actually nicely written. The remains were scrutinised by experts who decided that the skull fragments, neither fully simian nor fully human, were probably relics of a Piltdown man. That is a fucking mint name as well for a terrible superhero, innit? It's the Piltdown man, and it's just some fella in a bit of tweed. He had been a prehistoric ancestor of Homo sapiens today, was almost certainly 500,000 years old, and could well be the missing link between monkey and man. The Piltdown man was a scientific discovery of major importance, and he took his place alongside the Neanderthal man, the Heidelberg man, who's the one that they found knocking on the coffin, and the Peking man, who was just looking round the corner. They never saw him until then. One of the honourable ancestors of mankind in its several forms as we know it today. There were, of course, sceptics and critics, but on the whole, the Piltdown man was accepted and respected as a tangible missing link, and proof of the Darwinian theory of evolution, which I don't know if what we believe over here about that, but, it's not that I'm a religious man, I just think it seems a bit... I don't really trust anybody that claims to have figured out anything like that, just, and then we claim it all on one guy, just, again, suspicious to me. Alarm bells, you know what I mean? His reputation survived virtually untarnished for 40 years. Plaster casts of the jaw and the skull fragments were sent to museums all over the world to be put on display in glass cases. Dead as he was, the Piltdown man outlived the discoverer by many years, for Charles Dawson died in 1916 at the age of 52. The Piltdown man had several decades of vicarious life ahead of him in academic minds before he was finally destroyed. With a reputed age of about 500,000 years old, the Piltdown man was virtually the father of all human beings, perhaps mother. The sex was never determined. There were no relics which predated him. It would be mint, wouldn't it, if men and women had different teeth? If you're just like, oh yeah, she's like say, because I'm a man here, so like my front teeth there, you got like, oh, men have flathead teeth, all women's teeth, Phillips heads. Do you know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. There were no relics which predated him, and therefore he was unique. In honour of the man who discovered him, he was given the Latin name of Eonthropus dawsoni, which Eonthropus must be Latin for Charles. He had arrived and was presumably here to stay, but in learned anthropological circles, arguments and controversially continued behind the scenes. Gibberish. Just, there we go, he's poured his first one. The Piltdown man might have passed into history and become a basic ingredient of education, like the Battle of Hastings and the French Revolution, had it not been for the inexorable progress of science. Particularly, he started with the dashes. This is where you can tell he started drinking as well, because he just finishes loads of the lines with dashes and words, and just all go on to the next line. Where are we up to? Particularly in the fields of chemical analysis and spectrography, and in measurement techniques using X-rays and radioactivity, the measurement of the concentration of radioactive strontium-90 in bones, for example. A lot of commas there, Jesus. The measurement of the concentration of radioactive strontium-90 in bones, for example. Excuse me. After the Second World War, the attention of the scientific world was drawn once more to the relics of the Piltdown Man, when in 1950, Dr. Kenneth Oakley, a British museum geologist, used a new system of chemical dating by measuring the amount of fluorine in the bones, again a lot of commas. Buried bones absorbed fluorine from the soil. No longer they have been in the ground. The more fluorine they contain. But what? Buried bones absorb fluorine from the soil. No longer they have been in the ground, the more fluorine they contain. It's just like he's trying to cast spells now. If the process is very slow, and therefore the time scale is long. If the Piltdown bones were really 500,000 years old, then they would have shown an appreciable fluorine content. But in fact, they didn't. Dr. Oakley's careful test revealed that the Piltdown remains could not possibly be 500,000 years old, and was certainly no more than 50,000 years old, which is still pretty old, and I would argue still comes under the realms of archaeology and paleontology. This is where you got to go with science, though. This is where the scientist is doing, I'm going to fuck over this scientist. There's not enough of that now in science. A lot of scientists are just like, this guy here says gravity exists back then, so we're all going to go with gravity as a thing that pulls us down. If one scientist came along and went, no. Gravity is actually the moon pushing us down onto the earth, keeping us there like an invisible hand. The invisible hand that guides us. That's where that saying comes from. And we'd all be like, you're full of shit, that's nonsense. And all the other scientists be like, don't listen to him. Because if you listen to him, we're all out of jobs, we're all idiots, we're no longer scientists. But this guy didn't give a shit. He was like, I'm going to fucking ruin this guy's reputation. It's pretty cool. He had not at this stage tested the jawbone, but had assumed that it had come from the same point in time as the fragments of cranium and certain other genuine fossils. This discovery put paid to the missing link theory that Eoanthropus dawsoni, the Piltdown Man, otherwise known as Charles Dawsoni, represented the evolutionary stage of development between monkey and man. The missing link, 500,000 years old, was feasible, but a mere 50,000 years was far too recent for such a pronounced evolutionary change to have taken place, unless, of course, you've read something like Michael Tallinger's books, or any sort of book that pushes the idea that we're nowhere near as old as what we are. I'm not actually that far in that Michael Tallinger book. Whoever sent me that off my Amazon wish list, though, thank you. It was very kind of you. I have started it. I'm on my way through it now. The debunking of the Piltdown Man now began in earnest. The next step was conducted by Dr. J.S. Weiner, hell of a name, an anthropologist at Oxford University, when with the aid of Dr. Oakley himself, so Oakley and Weiner, wooden penis, and the colleague Professor Wilfrid Le Gros Clark. That's an horrible name to have to keep there, that doesn't keep coming up. All three men were experts, and they set out to analyse certain points of detail which seemed inconsistent with the missing link theory. Weiner, for instance, was puzzled by the flat-top teeth set in the undoubtedly ape-like jaw. While the flat molars were more characteristic of the human, they were flat in an odd way, that was me, sorry. And the edges of the flat area were sharper than one would expect. He carried out meticulous tests on the jawbone and teeth using the utmost up-to-date electronic equipment available at the time. Didn't need that extra up in there. As a result, a series of harsh facts came to light. In the first place, microscopic scratches on the flat tops of the molars suggested that they'd been filed down, and chemical analysis showed that the filed surface had been stained with a brown oil paint. But the next discovery was even more sensational. I should start doing this with jaws out of rats. Just start scratching at him with a file, and then I could fucking, paint them with a bit of tea, like you do with your homework when you're a kid in school and you've got to make the letter look old. I don't know how the teachers ever fell for that, being like, oh yeah, this letter looks thousands of years old because I've stained it with a bag of tea. I reckon that was just a way for the teachers to test us, so they could then be like, right, I like PG tips. So then what they'd do is they'd put a little drop of water on the piece of paper with the tea, give it a little, like that, a little, with the tongue, give it a taste and be like, that's a Tetley's that. You're not getting any higher than a B. Wouldn't want to come round your gaff for a brew. Do you know what I mean? Then the ones that parents drink PG, he's like, I'm going to be nice to this kid. Want to get on with the parents, so if they ever invite me round for a brew, I'm going to enjoy it. It's just just spitballing, where were we? But the next discovery was even more sensational. The jawbone itself, including the teeth, wasn't even 50,000 years old. It was contemporary. Chemical and radioactivity tests demonstrated beyond all doubt that it was part of the jaw of a modern ape. An orangutan, it was thought. That's a mint way to spell that. They spelt this orang-outang with a dash, it was thought, which had been cleverly doctored by chemical staining to resemble a genuine fossil. The three scientists then turned their attention to the other remains found in the gravel in the Piltdown pit. I've started reading this like a newsreader, and I do apologise. Some of the items, including fragments of cranial bone, were genuine enough and about 50,000 years old, but the remainder, including all of the principal specimens, were fakes. Their pieces of modern bone discoloured by chemical stains, in particular by chromate of iron. The Piltdown man was undoubtedly an outrageous fraud. That was by far one of the funnest paragraphs ever to read, purely for the grammar and having no idea what that next word was going to be. That was mint. The cat was out of the bag, even though, I'm sure in the last paragraph it said it was an orangutan. It did. The cat was out of the bag with a vengeance, but Dawson himself was above suspicion. He'd been dead for ages, and his reputation was such that one did not, indeed dared not, question his integrity. The culprit obviously lay elsewhere. It were known that Dawson used to pay the estate workmen for any flints and fossils they'd handed over to him, and the amount paid would vary with the apparent age and importance of the specimen. Consequently, there was an obvious temptation for the workmen to salt the gravel with faked fossils, in particular specimens which would appear to have prehistoric significance and would therefore earn a much, much bigger fee. It was assumed that these fossils, which had been shown to be genuinely 50,000 years old, were true Piltdown finds, but they were very much in a minority, while the remainder consisted of mainly stained contemporary bones, including the ape's jawbone with the filed teeth, had been put in the gravel as a hoax or fraud to extract money out of the poor old gullible Charles Dawson, or in Latin, Eronthropus dawsoni. Where are we up to? This theory, I had to go back a page to be able to find the Eronthropus word. This theory, however, couldn't stand up to critical examination. It presupposed, for a start, that the workmen concerned with the gravel pit possessed sufficient paleontological knowledge. Paleontological is a fucking well good word. To be able to stain bones and teeth with enough expertise to deceive an expert like Dawson. Yeah, see, that's a bit dodgy, innit? I can't imagine these workmen are being all up on fucking archaeology. Saying that, though, Dawson did it as a hobby. It was probably a growing hobby. I imagine some of these workmen would probably be considered like lower middle class, if that makes sense. So they might have a bit of an education or an understanding, enough money to have a bit of a free time and go around museums and learn and read books, but not enough time to actually do it as a, I could dig up fields to make money to sell bones and bits of fucking arrowheads from people that got killed by people who developed better weapons. Which is essentially all you're ever going to find, isn't it? Which is pretty grim. Whenever you're digging someone up in a field like that from a battle, you're digging up the losers. So really, what do we learn from that? Like, historically, what do we learn? Because them people, more than likely, didn't pass on their genes. The ones that did pass on their genes were the ones that killed them. So I don't really understand what we learn there. That doesn't seem very scientific. And that they were informed enough about evolutionary anatomy to take the trouble to file the molars in the ape's jawbone flat enough to suggest human origin, and indeed that they were able to obtain an ape's jawbone at all. It's not the kind of thing one can readily buy in a shop. He's added a little joke there. He's fucking, for those of you that aren't listening to this on Patreon, this man that wrote this is a very, very serious man, it seems. And it also seems like he got bored for maybe 10 chapters in the middle. He was bored out of his mind. But then every now and then he throws in a little bit of sarcasm or a little joke, but that seems to be an indicator of the ones that he enjoys. This is probably one of the longer chapters, and if that's the case, it usually is. No, it's not actually. But it's not much of a story, though. We're near the end of the story now. I know the story already on this one, which is a shame. That's why I've put it out publicly, because I can't be surprised by it, because I know about it. It was presupposed that they had planted the jawbone to match the genuine pieces of fossilised cranium which they discovered in the pit, and even more unlikely that they had recognised the skull fragments for what they were. Such a theory credited the Piltdown labourers with as much expert knowledge of fossils as Dawson himself, or the British Museum for that matter. As a theory, it was untenable. Even worse, it was easily confirmed that no further prehistoric relics had ever been found in Piltdown after Dawson's death. Something you might not know, there's still a monument erected to Charles Dawson for the Piltdown man. In the park nearest to where this was done. And to clinch the argument, it was eventually discovered that even the genuine animal fossils, those of which had been proved to be 50,000 years old, had actually come from elsewhere. The genuine fossils had, of course, been given credence to the spurious antiquity, the faked relics, but not one of them. That is nonsense. Giving credence to the spurious antiquity of faked relics, but not one of them, whether genuine or false, was of true Piltdown origin. The genuine fossils had, of course, given credence to the spurious antiquity, the faked relics, but not one of them, whether genuine or false, was of true Piltdown origin. I don't know. I'm sorry. They had been put into the gravel by hand. Yeah, okay. While one might just conceivably believe that a skilled and competent labourer might, given the know-how, be capable of staining modern bone fragments with bichromate chemicals and planting them in the gravel, it was surely asking too much to accept that the same workmen who also have access to genuine fossils dating back 50,000 years, included a prehistoric elephant tooth from Tunisia, and used these as props to be able to pass off the doctored modern bones as antiques. Not a single full stop in that paragraph. The man who possessed a large collection of fossils, including some prehistoric skull fragments, was Dawson himself, old Charlie boy. It was known that Dawson had carried out experiments in staining bones with various chemicals, partly to find a way of staining bones in order to preserve them, so he said, and partly to discover the way in which natural staining occurred. Finally, as a matter of interest, some 3 years after the discovery and launching upon the world of the Piltdown man, the remains of a second missing link were unearthed by Dawson at a site some 2 miles away from the original Piltdown gravel pit. Now, I didn't know this. These relics, when examined, were also shown to be chemically stained fakes. There we have most of the evidence in the case of Dawson versus the world of modern science. Dawson's been dead for donkey's years, and most of the evidence is circumstantial and therefore might not be true. The only tangible evidence remains in the fossils and flints, genuine and fraudulent, which have yielded the secrets to modern methods of analysis. All that's left are the questions. Was it an hoax or a fraud? Was Dawson guilty? If so, why did he do it? And what did he hope to gain? It was certainly no question of financial gain, indeed. Oh, I imagine he could go and give a few talks, though, eh? Make a bit of money off of that. People might have invited him to parties. This is the fellow that I've got, Charles Dawson here. He's the man who found the fucking Piltdown man. He found the missing link. You know, people would want him at the parties, wouldn't they, back then? Before you could have, you know, like the Gordon Ramsay lookalikes and stuff like that. They'd probably love to have him there. Dawson spent money in paying for specimens found by workmen in the gravel. Was it a case of an amateur desperately in search of professional recognition? If so, he did achieve it for a while, or at least for the duration of his life. It is simple enough to assume that Charles Dawson's enthusiasm for fossil collecting ran away with him, and that, not content with acquiring a miscellaneous collection of relatively insignificant flints and bones, he wished to be known and perhaps become famous for a really important find. He wanted to be a big fish in the small pond of fossil collectors. On the other hand, he should have gone to them fields in China where they're just constantly digging them up. On the other hand, it should be remembered that Dawson was a reputable member of his community and by profession a solicitor, and that he was assisted in his diggings at the sites by one of the British Museum's eminent paleontologists. Does it seem likely that Dawson, who during his life was never regarded as a rogue or a cheat, would implicate an expert who was very much of a personal friend in a brash and rather naive attempt to hoax the entire scientific world? No, actually what it seems like is science has gone, oh, we don't like that this fella's found this out, because all of the shit that we made up a few years ago now could prove to be false. Also, maybe this makes it actually look like we've not been around for as long as what we say we've been around for, and people will actually learn that Anatoly Fomenko may have been right. But let's not get into that, because I don't think Fomenko's put out his study yet. This is still in like the 1900s. Early 1900s anyway. Was Dawson himself the victim of another hoaxer, who, in addition to having the ability to stain bones so that they resembled fossils, had access to an impressive number of genuine fossils? And if so, bearing in mind Dawson's experience and expertise, would he be likely to be taken in? There's no evidence that Dawson was as gullible as those who accepted the fact that he Piltdown Man. On balance, he's really wrote this one out with a conclusion and everything. On balance, it rather looks as though Charles Dawson himself was the hoaxer. He's really flim-flam there, hasn't he? He's changed his mind there, it seems. His motives will never be known. His hoax, despite his many doubters and opponents, survived for 40-odd years and was finally demolished by science. Poor old missing link. That's a weird way to write. He's put missing link in quotes with an exclamation mark afterwards. When the fraud was finally exposed in 1953, there must have been many who were genuinely sorry to witness the annihilation of the Piltdown Man, the erasing of a remote and completely fictitious phase in the history of human evolution. One can't help feeling that there was a definite niche and need for the Piltdown Man in history. He had to be genuine. And that's it. That's the end of that chapter there. So if you've enjoyed this, come and join the Patreon. You can get a 7-day free trial. We'll be doing chapter 26 probably next week. That one's called Operation Inflation. It's got a room of what looks like maybe a bunch of Nazis. I'm not overly sure. Yeah, Nazis, I would say. It looks it. They got a magnifying glass, a couple magnifying glasses on the go. So that might be an interesting one. And I think, oh no, there's 2 left. So there's that one, 26, and then there's 27, and then we'll be on to the next book, which is Etiquette for Women. So 2 more to go. I'm going to end the little Patreon and Spotify recording here. So there you go. If you enjoyed that, remember, there's more on Patreon, another 24 chapters. You might find another episode on Spotify from this book from earlier in the year. Maybe. I think I did, actually. You'll find some of the daily updates on Spotify as well. But there's a lot more. There's, as of recording this one, which would be last week, there is 283 daily updates. 10 longer episodes where I'm reading comments left by dickheads and pissed off people, and I take the piss out of the voices that I make up. There's other stuff, vlogs, and 200 and something vlogs, I think, or 100 and something vlogs. I can't remember, but there's loads of stuff on there. Plus, you can read me books on there as well. You can download them as a digital file to keep even after your subscription on there's ended. So if you fancy a bit of that, and there's a few discount codes, and you get a message as well to tell you when the next Rat Pencil case will become available. So if you fancy it, go and sign up, patreon.com/worldaroundyou. I'll put it in the description below. But thanks for listening, and if there is an advert playing as soon as I finish talking, let it play. It earns me a fraction of a penny. I'll see you in a bit.